Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're really going into something profound. We're not just looking at history.
No, not at all.
We're undertaking a deep investigation into theology, into ethics, and legacy itself. We're tracing the historical and spiritual lineage of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him.
And this journey, it's really an exploration of what you could call divine continuity.
Divine continuity, I like that. It's this idea of how a spiritual mission is, well, carefully prepared and carried across centuries.
Right. Through concepts like purity and, maybe most importantly, absolute trust.
And our sources make it so clear that this is not just a stack of genealogy charts. You know, the family tree itself is a theological statement. It's robust.
A statement of purpose. It
Yeah,
describes a very deliberate process.
Exactly. And to set the tone for this whole deep dive, we have to
Yeah.
start with this incredibly powerful quote. It really anchors everything we're going to talk about.
Mhm.
It's from the collection of Muslim, where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, he states, "Indeed, Allah chose Kinana from the children of Ismail, chose Quraysh from Kinana, chose Banu Hashim from Quraysh, and chose me from Banu Hashim."
That language is just so striking.
It is. It's not just a progression, right?
Right.
It's describing this relentless selection process.
It's like a refinement, a gradual distillation of the most noble ethical fiber, you could say.
Yes. Okay, so let's unpack the implications of that idea right away.
Well, what's immediately crucial here, I think, is that focus on divine selection. Because if you or I approach this with a purely secular historical lens,
You'd see something else entirely.
you'd see tribal pride, and you might interpret it as, seeking aristocratic status.
Got it.
But the source material, it explicitly flips that whole notion on its head.
How so?
Genealogy in this specific context is precisely not about arrogance or pride. It's entirely about purpose. It's about the responsibility of carrying this spiritual light, this ethical blueprint,
Yeah.
and doing it through generations who were, it seems, consciously prepared for this monumental task.
The task of delivering the final message.
Exactly. So the emphasis on a noble lineage is really an observation. We're looking at a deliberate, multi-millennial preparation for the message of mercy and justice to arrive.
So the history itself is meant to underscore the integrity of the environment he came from.
That's it. It validates the foundation.
And this brings us right to our core mission for you, the listener, today. We're tackling the essential questions that our sources keep raising.
Right.
We want to know, why does the Quran place such importance on a noble lineage, only to then completely abolish the idea of inherited status later on?
That's a huge paradox.
It is. And how does this deep, ancient family tree reflect that unbroken continuity of divine purpose, all the way back to Ibrāhīm?
And maybe the most important for us.
Yes, the actionable part. What are the lessons we can pull out of this history about trust, about purity, about intergenerational responsibility?
The central reflection our source material gives us is, well, it's quite sharp, and it's very applicable to today.
It is. It says our spiritual DNA, the very essence of who we are, is ultimately defined by the values we intentionally choose to pass on.
Far more than the physical genes we just inherit.
Exactly. It suggests that building a legacy, it's an active, deliberate project. It's something carried out by every single generation.
And that deliberate effort is what we see playing out over centuries. The lineage provided a pre-existing ethical foundation.
Even in that harsh, often chaotic world of pre-Islamic Arabia.
Right. Even within that violent tribal structure, you had this core group that upheld virtues like honor, truthfulness, hospitality.
And that continuity is the key.
It's the key to validating the foundation of his message. It wasn't a message that just came out of thin air. It was the culmination of a very long tradition of integrity.
It's compelling. It's like we're tracking his spiritual inheritance, not a financial one. So let's start at the very source of that inheritance, the beginning of the chain. To really get the depth of this spiritual DNA, we have to go all the way back. We have to connect the lineage to the earliest foundational figures of monotheism.
Specifically to Ibrāhīm, and his wife Hajar.
And not just them, but them in that place, in that legendary barren valley of Makkah.
This point is absolutely critical. The initial setting, Makkah, defines the ethos of the entire lineage that follows.
How so? What was so special about it?
Well, it's what it wasn't. Makkah wasn't chosen for its natural beauty or its resources. It wasn't a fertile crescent.
This is the opposite.
Exactly. It was chosen for its absolute lack of physical resources. It was, by all accounts, an inhospitable, remote, and difficult place to be.
So the narrative of Ibrāhīm and Hajar, it's all about establishing the foundational qualities needed for this heritage to even survive.
Think about the emotional and the psychological weight of that moment. Ibrāhīm, upon divine instruction, leaves his wife and their infant son, Ismail.
In a waterless, desolate valley.
Yes, that act right there is the ultimate lesson in faith. It's profound sacrifice, and it is total, unconditional trust tawakkul in the divine plan.
I mean, the physical reality was imminent death. There's no other way to put it.
There isn't. But the spiritual reality required absolute surrender. That's the crucible.
So that sets the standard from day one. The founding moment wasn't one of, say, conquest or building a city. It was an act of pure, selfless obedience.
In the face of an existential threat, yes, the ethical mandate was forged not in a fertile capital city, but in a crucible of hardship.
And the miracle that follows, the water of Zamzam gushing forth.
Born from Hajar's desperate search for her child. It was a testament to divine provision, yes, but it was granted through human effort and absolute faith.
So the sources stress that the lineage's initial purpose wasn't about building an earthly kingdom.
No, it was about the survival of the original covenant of monotheism itself.
And the immediate heir to all of this faith is Ismail. He builds directly on that legacy.
He does. He shifts the focus from just survival to active service.
Right. The sources detail his crucial contribution, building the Kaaba alongside his father, Ibrāhīm. So why is the act of building the architecture itself so important in this whole lineage narrative?
Because the building of the Kaaba is the tangible, physical manifestation of their obedience.
Yeah.
As they raised the physical foundations of the building, they were simultaneously raising the spiritual foundations of the community that would later grow around it.
The sources call it the first house established for humanity to worship.
That's right. And this act solidified Ismail's legacy as one of proactive joint obedience and service. They were constructing the physical center of the spiritual universe that would define all their descendants.
So it cemented the role of this specific family line, the Arab line, as the custodians of the sacred house.
Permanently. It's a hands-on demonstration that faith isn't passive. It's not just a belief you hold in your heart. It translates immediately into physical and communal service.
So this spiritual heritage, it flowed directly through Ismail's descendants all the way down to Banu Hashim.
It wasn't accidental. The sources frame it as a conscious, guarded preservation of that initial mandate set by Ibrāhīm and Hajar.
It sounds like they were guarding a treasure for centuries.
That's a perfect way to phrase it. A spiritual treasure that was guarded by character. This lineage served as the critical bridge of faith.
A bridge.
It was the conduit, the channel that preserved pure monotheism, that original mandate of surrender and trust across centuries. Even as the world around them, the surrounding environment, grew more and more polytheistic and tribal.
So the divine selection process you mentioned at the start, Kenana from Ismail, Quraysh from Kenana.
That was all predicated on who would reliably carry the immense weight of that original covenant. The lineage of mercy had to be sustained by a parallel lineage of integrity.
The challenges they faced in that barren valley were a test.
The crucible that guaranteed the ethical strength of those who followed. It's a powerful argument, really. Your circumstances test your faith, and only the purest result, the purest character, survives to carry the mission forward.
It certainly makes the concept of noble birth sound far more demanding than comfortable.
It's a legacy of intentional difficulty, monumental effort, and constant vigilance. It's not a cushioned existence.
Right. And that physical structure, the Kaaba, it embodies that mandate of continuous service, which brings us right into the world of the prophet's more immediate ancestors. So let's move forward many, many centuries. We land on the immediate ancestors of the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, specifically the tribe of Quraysh.
And the sources are very clear about them. They weren't just another local tribe.
They held a unique status, a unique responsibility that came directly from that foundational legacy we just discussed.
Their status was, well, it was undeniable. The Quraysh were the recognized custodians of the Kaaba. This title, the Sadana, or guardianship, it gave them religious authority, of course.
But also much more.
Oh, immense moral and economic influence across the entire Arabian Peninsula.
And their reputation, which the sources highlight over and over.
It was built on two things. First, their connection to the sacred house, obviously. And second, as a result of that, their strong trade ethics.
That juxtaposition is fascinating to me. They're fierce traders, but they have this reputation for honor.
Well, in a world defined by cutthroat tribal rivalries and raids, the Quraysh had established a system of alliances and ethical conduct, it's often referred to as elif, that allowed them to run these vast trade routes safely.
From Yemen all the way to Syria.
Safely, which was unheard of.
So what were these strong trade ethics specifically? I mean, how did their role as custodians translate into economic credibility?
This is where we really define the concept of trust, or Āminah. Their entire economic success relied on the trustworthiness of that central authority. As custodians, they were responsible for providing two essential services to all the pilgrims who came to Makkah.
Sikaya and Rifada.
Right. Providing water and providing food and hospitality.
And these weren't just charitable acts.
Not at all. They were duties. They were responsibilities that cemented their moral authority. Think about it. If pilgrims traveling from all across the peninsula trusted the Quraysh to protect the house and provide for them, that trust naturally extended to their trade caravans.
Their reputation for integrity was their credit rating.
Perfectly put. They were the inheritors of that physical and moral responsibility established by Ismail, and they translated service to the sanctuary into operational excellence.
And then, within the tribe of Quraysh, we zero in on one family, Banu Hashim, and specifically the Prophet's grandfather, Ābd al-Muṭṭalib.
The sources spent a lot of time on him. He exemplifies the integrity required to uphold that spiritual mission.
And his key act, which is probably one of the most famous stories leading up to the birth of the Prophet, was his rediscovery of the well of Zamzam. But let's go deeper than just the discovery itself. Why was the return of Zamzam so symbolically potent at that specific time and in that place?
Because the rediscovery of Zamzam by Ābd al-Muṭṭalib was not just a historical moment, it was a profound spiritual restoration.
The well had been buried for centuries, right? Lost.
Completely lost. So its return, especially since it was revealed to him through a dream, was seen by all the other tribes as a divine sign. It unequivocally confirmed the moral supremacy of his family, the Banu Hashim.
And you have to remember the practical context.
Exactly. Ābd al-Muṭṭalib was poor. He was opposed by the more powerful clans in Quraysh. And yet he takes on this monumental task of digging, and at first he's only aided by his one son.
His commitment then demonstrated genuine, selfless service.
It was an act of physical humility and immense perseverance, and it secured his moral authority over all his rivals who had tried to obstruct him.
So it wasn't a power play. It was an act of service that restored the original source of provision and trust back to the entire community.
Yes. He embodied the values of Āminah, or trust, and tremendous ishfa, hospitality. And that links him directly back to the legacy of Hajar and Ismail centuries before.
He set the ethical standard.
Absolutely. True leadership among Ibrāhīm's descendants is based on genuine service and ensuring the welfare of others, especially the needy and guests. And this public, undeniable demonstration of integrity paved the way for his grandson to later be known universally as al-Amin.
The trustworthy.
The foundation of trust was built long before the revelation even began.
And then we turn to Āminah bint Wahab, the Prophet's mother.
Her contribution to the lineage is described in terms of these essential complementary qualities. She had a noble ancestry on her own side, and she was known for her purity, her grace, her modesty.
And here's where it gets really interesting for me, because the source analysis, it emphasizes that the prophetic character was not an accident. This level of nobility didn't just erupt spontaneously out of nowhere.
That is the pivotal analysis. The character was actively, spiritually, and morally prepared by these preceding generations.
So the purity and grace of Āminah reinforced the integrity established by Ābd al-Muṭṭalib.
They created a moral environment that was primed for prophecy. You see this deliberate chain. Ibrāhīm provides the absolute faith. Ismail provides the dedicated service and custodianship. The Quraysh provide the ethical framework for society.
And Ābd al-Muṭṭalib and Āminah provide the unwavering integrity and spiritual purity right before the birth.
It's a seamless chain. Every predecessor served to elevate and purify the environment, ensuring that the final message took root in the most morally fortified family possible. The continuity of character is the proof of the continuity of purpose.
So if the lineage was so perfectly prepared, so ethically noble, what did the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, do with that status once his mission began? Did he leverage it for power, or did he do something else entirely? And that brings us right to the paradox, the profound paradox at the heart of the message.
It really is.
The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, possessed the most recognized, vetted, noble lineage in all of Arabia. A fact he himself acknowledged.
Right.
And yet his message was fundamentally aimed at dissolving the very concept of inherited tribal superiority that a lineage like that implied.
It's arguably the most revolutionary part of his message for that time period. He absolutely used his status early on. I mean, he had to.
For protection.
For protection, for credibility within a society that was obsessed with bloodlines. But at the same time, he fundamentally reframed the entire criteria for human honor.
He took the platform of his noble birth.
And used it to dismantle the aristocracy of birthright. His actions spoke volumes. He was essentially telling a society obsessed with pedigree, I was born the best of the best, but I'm here to tell you that birthright, lineage, wealth, it means absolutely nothing in the sight of God.
The playing field is leveled.
Completely leveled by individual ethical commitment.
And to drive that point home, the sources point to the new, specific, and universal metric of true honor. It's a quote from the Quran, from Surah Al-Jurat. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, declared, O humanity, indeed, we created you from a male and a female, and made you into peoples and tribes, so that you may know one another. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you.
The most righteous, the one with the most taqwa.
Right.
That verse.
Right.
It's not just a theological statement. It is a constitutional declaration for the entire civilization that was emerging.
It shifts the measurement of worth completely.
From external, uncontrollable things like your race, your tribe, your lineage, to the internal, controllable reality of your character, your conscious conduct, your level of righteousness, your taqwa.
What does taqwa really mean in this context?
Well, literally it means God consciousness or piety, but neffically it manifests as careful, purposeful living. It's the active commitment to moral integrity.
And this emphasis was a seismic shift in 7th century Arabia.
Oh, absolutely. A society where your tribal affiliation dictated everything, your status, your rights, your protection. By establishing this new metric, he effectively made his own noble birth irrelevant as a basis for status.
So he elevated the moral choice of a new convert.
Say, a freed slave like Bilal, or a Persian like Salman.
Above the hereditary position of a wealthy tribal chief.
Exactly. It's a staggering social inversion.
Which means the concept of family and kinship itself had to be redefined. If your bloodline isn't the primary marker of honor anymore, then the whole idea of who is my family has to change.
It absolutely does. And the prophet, peace be upon him, he provided the spiritual definition for this new community. While he always upheld the bonds of blood, he redefined the ultimate bond.
He said, my true family are those who follow me.
Or in another narration, my family are all the righteous.
That statement fundamentally redefines the social and legal structure.
It does. It shifts the concept of family from being purely biological to being, well, faith-based. It becomes a voluntary, eternal association based on shared values, shared purpose, and a shared mission.
But this doesn't eliminate the importance of blood ties.
No, not at all. But it elevates the spiritual and purposeful bond above the mere biological one. And this concept of family as mission became the driving force of the new community, the Ummah.
The true inheritance is no longer physical property or titles.
It's the commitment to truth, service, and righteousness. And this meant the prophet's own children and his closest relatives were now held to an even higher standard because their primary identity was tied to the mission, not just to the name.
So let's bring this ancient mandate right into our modern world. What is the application for you, for the listener today? How do we connect this to our own responsibilities?
Our sources emphasize that families today have to focus intensely on passing on values of truth and service, far more than passing on titles or status or, accumulated property.
This is the practical manifestation of family as mission in contemporary life.
Right. In our hyper-competitive materialist age, it's so easy to define family legacy by the size of the inheritance or the prestige of the university diplomas or the career success of the children.
But the prophetic model instructs us to measure legacy by the resilience and integrity of the values we transmit.
You have to ask yourself, are my descendants inheriting the same level of commitment to justice and service that Ābd al-Muṭṭalib demonstrated when he labored to restore Zamzam for everyone?
Are they inheriting the purity and humility and grace of Āminah?
The challenge is existential. If the prophetic lineage was about generations preparing for a grand spiritual mission, our modern families must view themselves in the exact same way, as units preparing the next generation to successfully navigate moral complexity and contribute ethically to a global society.
The mission is always ethical leadership, no matter the era. It reframes family life completely. The home becomes a training center for ethical citizenship.
Okay, so having established that long lineage of preparation, Let's transition now to the immediate family unit and show how each member contributed directly and fundamentally to that overarching spiritual mission.
They weren't just supportive bystanders.
Not at all. They were active, necessary participants in the success of the new message.
Starting with the core unit, the Prophet's parents, Abdullah and Āminah. They represent that final convergence of the whole process. They embodied trust and purity.
Their story is brief, but it's essential. Their moral standing ensured that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was born into an environment that embodied the finest qualities of the Quraysh, unmarred by the widespread corruption and polytheism of the time.
And their early loss only seems to emphasize that the mission was always communal. It required others to step in immediately.
That communal responsibility is so key. It highlights the transitional figures who were responsible for his upbringing after his mother died.
His grandfather, ʿAbd al-Muṭṭalib, and then his uncle, Ābd.
Yes. And this guardianship structure, it emphasizes the sheer importance of the mission. It shows that the extended family understood, even if it was unconsciously, that they were protecting something sacred.
ʿAbd al-Muṭṭalib, a figure of immense moral authority, protected him in his early years.
And after his death, his uncle, Ābd, took the mantle. Ābd's role is fascinating.
Because he never formally embraced Islam.
Exactly. Despite that, he offered unwavering physical protection against the rising tide of opposition from the rest of the Quraysh.
And his loyalty was driven by what?
Tribal honor, familial obligation to the Banu Hashim lineage, the very definition of that deep-seated honor the lineage was built upon. And this protection allowed the mission to survive its critical, vulnerable infancy.
It shows that loyalty to the lineage's mandate went even beyond religious conversion. It was an ethical duty.
Precisely.
Now, let's turn to the pivotal roles played by the Prophet's wives, whom the sources collectively describe as community builders. And we have to start with Khadija, peace be upon her.
Khadija's role was foundational. It wasn't merely supportive. When that first revelation struck, the Prophet, peace be upon him, was shaken. He sought refuge in her.
And her immediate response, her validation and assurance, that was the anchor.
It cemented his emotional and psychological ability to accept the weight of the message. And she didn't just comfort him. She immediately assessed his character. She said, "By God, he will never disgrace you."
And then she lists the reasons.
Yes. She says, "For you maintain good relations with your relatives, you speak the truth, you help the poor and the destitute, you serve your guests generously, and you assist the deserving calamity-afflicted ones."
That is so profound. She used the very characteristics of that noble lineage, truthfulness, service, hospitality, as proof that he was a prophet.
It confirms the entire thesis of the lineage as a preparation. And on top of that, she provided massive, unquestioning financial and strategic backing during the most vulnerable, persecuted years of the mission. She set the absolute standard for selfless devotion.
It shows the mission requires total dedication from everyone in the family unit.
Total sacrifice.
And then we shift to Azisha, peace be upon her. The sources specifically call her a crucial teacher of the Ummah, the global community. What was the specific nature of her intellectual contribution?
Her contribution was overwhelmingly instructional and intellectual, and it spanned decades. Because of her sharp memory, her curiosity, and her youth, she was instrumental in preserving and transmitting the Prophet's private conduct.
His family life, complex legal discussions.
All of it. She essentially served as a living academy of learning for the community, particularly for women. She addressed practical jurisprudence, explained the intimate nuances of the Prophet's character that no male companion could have observed.
So her life reinforces that knowledge transmission and intellectual rigor were central, non-negotiable parts of the prophetic family structure.
Absolutely.
And the other wives, described as essential builders of the community, they broadened the mission's reach.
They played vital diplomatic and communal roles. They helped integrate various tribes and families into the new society. They provided examples of piety for diverse groups of women, and they helped establish the legal and moral framework of the new state.
The entire household was functioning as the administrative, educational, and spiritual nucleus of the community.
It really was.
And finally, that spiritual light continues through the children, particularly Fatima and her sons, San and Hussein.
The light of the mission continues through them, even though prophethood itself had ceased. Fatima is revered for her close adherence to her father's character, her humility, her service, her piety.
And our sons carried the torch of ethical resistance and spiritual leadership for the next generations.
The takeaway here powerfully reinforces that family as mission concept we've been talking about.
The lesson is that every family member, parent, guardian, wife, child, had a specific, non-negotiable role in service to faith.
No one was a passive recipient of the light. They were all active, essential participants in its transmission, ensuring the mission survived and flourished. This model is the blueprint for community resilience.
Okay, so we've traced the spiritual DNA, we've analyzed the historical shift from bloodline to belief. So what does this highly structured, ethically focused history mean for us, right here, right now? How do we turn this historical lens towards contemporary life, towards our own family structures?
Well, the immediate application is to modern leadership and ethics. Our sources offer timeless guidance on this. Leadership that's derived from family heritage must align strictly with ethics. The entire lineage of mercy and trust was built on service, trust, and sacrifice.
Not entitlement.
Never entitlement. That's a crucial distinction. The moment heritage is treated as a free pass or a source of entitlement, a right to power or wealth without moral accountability, the integrity of that legacy instantly collapses.
So the prophet's example taught that his authority came from his character and the divine mandate.
Not from the mere fact that Ābd al-Muṭṭalib was his grandfather. And this is a profound check against inherited privilege in any modern system. Leaders from prominent backgrounds, whether they're political, religious, or corporate, they have to recognize that their inherited status only increases their burden of ethical conduct.
It doesn't excuse them from it.
Not one bit.
Let's pivot to a major modern challenge. This highly digital context, what our sources refer to as the modern or AI era. We talk all the time about the crisis of connection. And the sources specifically highlight the risk of disconnected homes in this modern age, where digital interfaces are often replacing genuine presence, compassion, and purposeful communication within the family.
The historical model we've been discussing seems incredibly relevant here. It provides the antidote.
How so?
The prophetic family model, where every member had a shared, visible mission in service to faith, it offers a direct solution to modern familial disconnection because it demands presence, it demands compassion and collective purpose.
Think about the practical difference.
Right. In a disconnected home, family time is parallel. Everyone is consuming separate content on separate screens.
In the prophetic model, family time is unified. It's shared learning, shared service, shared ethical deliberation.
And if that historical model was robust enough to launch a global religion from a small desert town, then its principles prioritizing mutual responsibility and genuine engagement are vital for building resilient families today.
It literally means putting down the screens and focusing on the shared mission of virtue, like Khadijah focusing on the mission with the prophet.
Exactly. And connecting this back to community strength, the ultimate relevance for today is that strong, purposeful families are the undeniable bedrock of strong communities. We're talking about society building, starting at the kitchen table.
You can't have a just or functional society if its foundational units, the family, are morally ambiguous or internally disconnected.
The prophet's family, from the hardship of Ibrāhīm all the way down to the sacrifice of Hussein, exemplified the successful transfer of ethical power. Our true legacy today is defined not by the fame of our surname or the size of our bank account,
but by our visible, consistent service, the positive impact we make, and the purposeful values we successfully instill.
Right.
So if we look at rebuilding that prophetic family model in modern life, what are the practical, non-preachy takeaways for families who want to refocus their mission?
The sources summarize this need for practical application by calling for a return to 3 core pillars within the family unit.
Love, justice, and responsibility.
Love provides the emotional security and foundation for children to grow confidently. Justice ensures the fairness and accountability that's necessary for moral growth, treating every family member with dignity and fairness.
And responsibility transforms the family from a passive unit of consumption
Into an active agent of good in the wider world. It demands contribution and service from everyone.
It's about actively cultivating a home environment where ethical conduct is the highest, non-negotiable priority.
Just as Ābd al-Muṭṭalib made protecting the Kaaba his highest priority centuries ago, this historical analysis, it serves as a spiritual instruction manual. It reminds us that our family is not just where we live. It is the primary engine of our faith and our service, regardless of the technological age we inhabit.
This has been an incredibly deep dive into how spirituality and history intertwine to form this ethical roadmap. So let's summarize the three main pillars that we want you to carry forward from this whole discussion.
Okay.
First, the prophet's genealogy is not accidental. It reflects purity, trust, and a deliberate divine selection aimed at establishing a continuous chain of mercy, a preparation for his message.
Second, despite having the most noble lineage, he used that position to teach that true nobility lies not in your tribe or your title, but solely in your character and righteousness, in your taqwa. And that leveled the social hierarchy entirely.
And finally, family is a continuing mission. Our core responsibility is to transmit sustaining values across time, making sure the next generation inherits purpose, shared values, and ethical resilience, not just, disposable property.
And now, for an actionable reflection. This is based on the guidance in our source material. We want to challenge you, the learner, with a few practical steps inspired by this deep dive.
Okay.
First, take some time to trace your own family values, whether they're spiritual or cultural. Which of those traditions are deeply rooted in service and integrity, reflecting the foundational ethics of the prophetic model, and which ones? Which ones might need some renewal or deliberate cleansing in light of this concept of taqwa?
And think about this suggestion of writing a family mission statement. I love this idea. It's a tangible way to apply the concept of family as mission.
It is.
Define explicitly what core values, justice, service, truthfulness your descendants will inherit from you beyond any wealth or assets. What is the ethical commitment they have to carry forward?
And finally, consider reviving or just initiating family dua supplications or gatherings. Make those gatherings centered on learning, on shared ethical discussion, on planning service.
Not just routine celebrations or passive entertainment.
Exactly. Center the family around the active pursuit of knowledge and that shared spiritual purpose.
That brings us to our final provocative thought, for you to carry forward as you reflect on this powerful and demanding lineage.
Remember this vital distinction. Your real genealogy is not merely the line of names you came from. Your real genealogy is the chain of people whose lives you actively improve through your actions, your ethics, and your service.
That is the true, enduring legacy of mercy.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the lineage of mercy and trust.
We hope this exploration inspires you to build your own mission of integrity for the future.